Hello and welcome to this podcast. Today we are very pleased to welcome Professor David Bolt from Liverpool Hope University. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing okay, thank you.
Excellent. David, could you tell us a little bit about your subject and your background and what you teach here at Liverpool Hope University?
Yeah, of course. Well, I am Professor of Disability Studies and Interdisciplinarity. So I'm known sort of internationally for my work on disability studies, but in particular I am very interested in taking interdisciplinary approaches to that subject.
That's fantastic. David, could you tell us a little bit more about interdisciplinarity, please?
Yeah, okay, so while I'm very interested in consolidating work that's already been done in disability studies and keeping it, if you like, a pure subject that goes under the title of disability studies, I'm equally interested in drawing disability studies into other subjects and other fields, and that's where the interdisciplinary angle of my work comes in.
Fantastic. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got into this particular subject yourself and your own studies in this, your own early studies in this area?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, my work began when I did my own degree, which was in literary studies. So I started in the humanities. And one of the things I noticed in the humanities back then, which was more than 25 years ago, was that in the UK, there was quite a lack of disability studies, a lack of engagement with disability studies in the humanities. And one of the things I realised as I was doing my degree is that I could actually do something to plug that gap in the UK. And to that end, I then went on and did a PhD, which did indeed focus on blindness in literature, which was one of the early approaches to disability studies in the humanities in the UK.
You're quite prolific, David, in your writing. I've noticed this from reading around your background. What is it that drives you to produce the work that you do?
Well, I suppose the only honest answer would be a love of disability studies and, to be absolutely fair, a love of writing. So I've always been a keen writer. I started as a songwriter originally, kind of failed miserably as a songwriter, but then found some success as an academic writer. But even now, my academic writing is very informed by experience and very much takes advantage of a creative approach that I picked up in my work along the way in literary studies.
Fantastic. What would you say, David, for perhaps a young student out there at the moment would be important things to consider before they begin their studies in this particular area?
Yeah, I mean, this is perhaps a funny thing to mention at this point, but I think it's a love of knowledge and a love of learning. These seem quite basic things to mention, but they sometimes get forgotten in the mix of other day-to-day things and, if you like, modern concerns. Maybe an awareness of social issues with which you want to engage. And so I think that combination of that, a love of knowledge and a love of society, perhaps, is the combination that would be very desirable in a student.
Could you give us a slight overview or a short overview of the disabilities course and interdisciplinarity that you teach?
Yeah, well, I teach at a few levels. So undergraduate, we have various courses that relate to disability studies, SCN and inclusion. I'm certainly involved in those courses, although it is colleagues who lead those particular courses. The courses I lead are at postgraduate level. So we have a disability studies MA. And at that level, I have been working for more than 12 years. So we introduced the Disability Studies MA at an international event in 2013. We are really lucky on that course. It's a real privilege to teach on that course because we meet such interesting students every year. They're very dedicated students. They're doing the course in the evenings, so they're fitting that course around many other things often. Over the years, we've had great successes. So we have like half a dozen doctorates that have come out of that course. A couple of my colleagues here at Liverpool Hope University are senior lecturers, and they started by doing that Disability Studies MA some years ago.
Fantastic! I think that's quite a ringing endorsement for the course itself. So, David, could you tell us a little bit about how the design of your courses perhaps challenged the traditional ideas around disability?
Yeah, so if I were to focus on one of the modules, for example, it's called Critical Disability Theory. That particular module focuses on a whole lot of different theories, but it starts by focusing on critical theory, then it moves into critical disability theory, but then finally we get to something that I call autocritical disability theory. And the reason I mention that one is because that's something that's come from my own work and work that I've done with colleagues here at Liverpool Hope University. So we sort of challenge original notions of critical theory, moving them into critical disability theory, and then, as I say, into something that's very specifically involved with personal experience, so ways in which personal experience can disrupt grand notions of disability.
How do you think the insights from disability studies can inform public policy or perhaps workplace inclusion efforts? And maybe this could also discuss where students who study our courses can move forward with their careers as well.
Yeah, well, one of the modules on the Disability Studies MA is called Disability and Professional Practice, which is a really interesting space for me to talk with students who are, engaged in various forms of professional practice, as it were. And we often explore how disability is viewed in the workplace, which is often around levels of accommodation and inclusion at best. But one of the things that I frequently try to bring to the table is that disability can also be approached in terms of appreciation. So it's not just about including disabled people, but truly recognising what they bring to the table in terms of knowledge and ideas and maybe a deeper experience with society than other people might already have.
You mentioned interdisciplinarity as well, David. How do you see disability studies perhaps intersecting with other fields, such as gender studies or race studies as well?
Yeah, so we do have a module called Disability and Disciplines on the Disability Studies MA, and that module in many ways is based on one of my books that focuses on interdisciplinarity in particular. And in each week of the course, we explore another field with which we engage along the lines of interdisciplinarity. So, for example, we might approach gender studies with the benefit of disability studies, and that intersectional relationship brings many new ideas. So often it's a case of breathing new ideas into old studies, as it were, which is very productive.
I absolutely love that approach, David. It sounds like it's a very forward-looking course, and it's a course that is looking at challenging some of those preconceived notions, perhaps, that maybe wider society has beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm the first to recognise that inclusion is really important. Some parts of the world we refer to accommodation, and that makes good sense. But that word appreciation I will always keep coming back to, because that way we can draw on a new knowledge base, and as I say, that breathes new ideas into some maybe stagnant notions of disability and indeed of society more broadly.
Very good. David, could you possibly share an example of a particularly memorable classroom discussion or experience that you've had with a student?
Yeah, well, that's got to be the hardest question you've asked me. To be fair, on the Disability Studies MA, we essentially have outstanding students and excellent students, and these are the norm in that classroom
Amazing.
setting. So every week I teach that 2 evenings a week. And without fail, in every session, the students contribute something that's very interesting or very important. Another one of my mantras is that, the main resource in the classroom is not what's between my ears, but rather what's in front of me, i.e. my students and their ideas and their contributions to the conversations that we have.
What are some ways your students have applied disability studies or knowledge in their careers or communities that you're aware of?
Yeah, so an obvious example, perhaps, if we were to start at the beginning, one of my first disability studies MA students, Dr. Ella Houston, she did the MA when there were only two students. We had two students, Dr. Ella Houston and now Dr. Stephen Newport, and obviously both of those went on to do very well. But I do remember teaching Ella Houston about disability and advertising in just a single session. And then we had a conversation later on in the course, and it went along the lines of Ella was becoming more interested in the possibility of doing a PhD. We had a conversation about where that might go, and I had noted that she was especially interested in that particular session we did on advertising. And then if we fast forward a little, she went on to do a full PhD at Lancaster University, where she focused on advertising and disability studies. And then a little bit later, she went on to release her own book on that subject. And indeed, we draw on that book now on the Disability Studies MA course.
David, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you when you're here, where do you see your subject going as a discipline in perhaps the next decade? What do you think is the most important steps for the subject to take?
Yeah, I think the directions that I'm trying to encourage disability studies into, and this is perhaps in relation to a couple of projects that I'm involved in. Just to clarify, I'm editor-in-chief of the Journal of Literary and Cultural Disability Studies, as well as a forthcoming venture, which is the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Disability Studies. And in both of those entities, I am trying to do everything I can to encourage disability studies, firstly in the direction of interdisciplinarity, which I've mentioned quite a few times here, also in the direction of internationality, which perhaps speaks for itself. The more global the approach to disability studies, the
Excellent.
better it's going to be. And then also in the direction of intersectionality, which I mentioned in relation to gender. Those are the three directions that I'm constantly pushing disability studies into.
David, what would you say makes studying an undergraduate or an MA at Liverpool Hope different from other places?
Liverpool Hope University is known for its sense of community. It's a relatively small university with a lovely campus is the only way to describe it. I've been here for 16 years, and I kind of essentially live on campus. I live in one of the Liverpool Hope houses. It's a very sort of warm community, and that's obviously a really good thing for students and staff alike.
When I speak to students around the campus, they speak so warmly about the courses that you teach. And do you think there's a particular reason for that?
Yeah, I think in many cases it's that the students start to realise that what they've got to say is actually really important. So it's, of course I can go to the front and explain I'm a professor and I've done these books and I've done that work and so on, and that's all great, and I do want to talk about that. I do want to share that with the students. But the part that they're perhaps not expecting is to have their own ideas truly appreciated. So I will often ask for their discussion, and although I've got, tight plans for sessions, I will happily drop those plans to make more space for the discussion of students and the ideas that they bring forward. So I think that recognition of their value as thinkers in contributions to knowledge is really important.
David, the reports that we get back from our students, as I've mentioned, are resoundingly positive with what they do, and I'm sure that so many of our students go out into the world and do positive things. Can you think of any students perhaps you're aware of outside of academia, what they've done with their careers, or how a qualification in this might more generally support a student who would like to work in this area in the future?
I'm constantly getting emails and contacts from students from around the world who are telling me that they are no longer working in disability specifically, but their work in disability studies is constantly something to which they turn. So, for example, it might be, that there is some policy at work that comes into play, and that they are at the kind of cutting edge when it comes to applying that policy or understanding it. So I think the real point is that no matter what area you work in, disability is always relevant. There's a truism in disability studies, which is if you're not disabled yet, then you soon will be. And that's the natural progression of life. The reason I mention that is because it means that disability is always relevant no matter what we do. Sometimes perhaps it's convenient to think of disability as something that happens in the corners of society. But in reality, of course, it's relevant to everyone in society for the reasons I just mentioned.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been such an insightful conversation. So I will include around the text that will be around this conversation on our website, how to get in contact to study with you. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, and thank you for taking time to ask me these questions.